Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast, is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm chatting with Nancy Ridlen. Nancy is the owner and principal at W3 Sales and a sales leader and hospitality expert who loves the hustle, innovation, and tenacity of this dynamic sector. With a passion for enhancing dining experiences, Nancy brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the industry, focusing on integrating innovative design approaches. At W3 Sales, they inspire their customers to get creative beyond the food and help chefs and restaurant owners proactively keep up with industry trends, source great prices, streamline the purchase process, and solve problems more simply and efficiently. Nancy, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thank you so much for asking me, Aaron. It's an honor.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk. I've talked with other interior designers about this idea of design and dining and food service, but you live in both worlds. Like, you have feet firmly planted in both. Whereas these are guys and gals that they do interior design, like they're the pillows and the frilly stuff. Whereas you're kind of at the heart of it. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit, just kind of broadly, about W3 and what your approach is like when you think about food service and design.
You kind of captured everything. Designers kind of want everything to be beautiful and function is not taken into account. And then you've got the food service professionals that are thinking about breakage and can I keep the food warm and all those other things. And so our approach is really to sit back and understand with the operator, hey, what are you having trouble with currently? Is it is it heat retention? Are you breaking a ton of product? And and then the other side of it is, what are your customers, what struggles are they having? Is the product too heavy? Is it easy to navigate on the tray? And you have to ask all those questions. But then one thing that W3 wants to do is understand all these things and then also understand aesthetics and the design of what your customer wants to have in their facility and bring both worlds together.
Yeah. And you led me right into the next question I have for you. And, when I think about what senior living needs, that's different than maybe some of your other clients that do hotels and restaurants. When you think about a well-designed dining environment, how can all the things you just talked about impact that well-being of that resident in those communities?
Well, it's important that it we have to forget about the past in a nursing home and boring food on a plate. The expectation for the guests these days is a more elevated dining experience.
Yeah.
And this is their home. And so that is what people expect. And that's really important that the facility meets those expectations, that they walk in and that they're getting an interesting presentation and it's not the same every single time. But also to make the aesthetics beautiful, like they're sitting and having lunch at a restaurant or they're hosting their family over at their house. That's the kind of experience you want to give the customer.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head there, right? Like, yes, senior living is these residents' home, but at the same time, that's not the same expectation as like, hey, I'm making dinner for the three of us in our house, or the four of us, or my son has come over, so we're going to have a nice meal, right? It's we want to, like you said, elevate that experience because it's this weird combination. And so when you think about like some of the design elements that you have to like pull from and source things from, what are some of those that you have found that have been really successful in kind of creating those elevated experiences you're just describing?
Yeah, so it's I like to take it from several different angles. When we are first, you want to take it from a design approach and what are the trends? What's trending now? And so at W3, we look at interior trends, we look at retail trends, we look at a bunch of different things outside the industry. We also take as a manufacturer rep for food service factories, they're always educating us on what is new and in the industry. And so keeping up with those trends is really, really important. The other thing is to understand, again, it's really understanding the property because what I think is pretty or what I think is cool, they might not think is cool. And so, really, you have to go in, ask a lot of questions, and sit down and look at the aesthetics. If they do have a mood board or a design board, ask for that. A lot of people, if you're renovating, will provide a mood board, a design board. And we ask for that. We ask for colors and textures. And it's crazy, but you can take textures and obviously color, and you can make it come up with a really, really pretty tabletop that goes with the aesthetics in the room. So from that, we'll put together a mood board. And so with different design elements, maybe it's the color of wood they're using, or maybe it's what their sofas are looking like, or
Yeah.
their dining chairs. We'll take all those elements and try to tie it in to create something that they're like, oh, this is us. That's what you want them to walk away with.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not as easy as just doing that because, like I said, what I think goes doesn't always resonate with the property. And so it's important that you provide several different options. Some people like very traditional, old school, that's what they're comfortable with. It's not my jam, but it's
Right.
what their guests want. It's what the residents want. Some some properties want some more modern approach, and so we have products for that. So you just want to provide a couple of different options and then do a presentation in front of them. So
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on something there where every community is different. It's got to be specialized for the market, for the people they're trying to attract, like what they're trying to do. But I know the one thing that, at least when I look at what kind of china am I buying, what kind of utensils, what am I putting on the table for the residents, I think about the functionality piece of it as well. And so when you go into this process, how do you do that balance of functionality and aesthetics when you're looking at creating a tabletop or creating a service in a dining room for a senior living community?
that's a really good question. And because dysfunction is probably we want to not put baby in the corner on function because that is just as important because you want to give the residents dignity in dining in their experience. And so you want to find, and thankfully the food service world has really come out with some incredible products designed specifically for senior living and bowls that you can pick up your food easier than a traditional place like a plate bowl.
Yeah.
They have coffee cups that have an extra piece of porcelain that protects a barrier between the heat of the cup. And then a lot of the china that they make today, you want to be careful on that too, because heat retention is really important. And if you use glass and you're looking for heat retention, that's not going to work. The heat's going to go out. If you use a stronger porcelain vitrified product, it's going to hold up longer. The other thing you have to take it to account, what I mentioned earlier, is breakage. The property has to determine, do I want to spend a lot of money upfront and make the investment, or I want to have affordable china that breaks all the time or glass. And because I want that low cost, or I like to invest in the china that's going to last over time and have less breakage. Another thing that I think is important, and especially in the food service industry, is to make sure you buy something that is food service, because
Yeah.
if you go retail and go rogue, I love retail. However, because the trends are constantly changing, yes. But the problem is the trends constantly change. You want to find a products that you can get over and over and over again, and they're not going to discontinue. Typically, when a factory brings in a new pattern or flatware or glassware, they're going to stick with that for a long, for a while. So you don't have to change everything out. But the other part of function too is, where is it going? Is it going in the dining hall, or is it going to room service? Is it going into memory care? Memory care is another really important one you should clue in and ask
Yeah.
about, because there's so many different types of vessels, to attract people to eat. So there's a lot more that meets the eye, I think, than just
Yeah.
plates and flatware and glass.
I think all those things that you brought up are things that when I talk to operators on the ground, they don't really think about it. They just think about cost almost always. And I love the fact that you said don't go buy retail, because I don't know how many times I've walked into a new acquisition or a property that I'm trying to manage or I'm helping manage. And it's this hodgepodge of stuff. And everybody's like, oh, well, we had to go and buy plates and we found these really nice ones, but they don't sell them anymore. And so now we don't know what to do with them. And it's exactly that thing you just described of, well, they saw something they liked or they tried to save themselves money. And now they've got 7 different plates of 4 different sizes. And it's just literally was having a conversation with the client this morning about, we can find stuff or we can spend a little bit more and everything's going to look great. And now your entire dining experience is just that much better. And so it's such a huge thing. I'm so glad you brought up the don't buy retail.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
I know
So
it's tempting, and because a lot of the communities do have committees of people that will want to pick the china. And I love that, because I think that some people say, oh, that's a challenge because we're not going to be able to find exactly what they want. But I think they're great. But as the property and as a food service director, I would recommend you go out, you understand what they want to do, and involve someone like me and helping identify a bunch of different options, but you narrow it down, to those pieces and try to accommodate what they're looking for. And then you make the presentation and give them a select number of options. So
yeah, you bring up something that I think makes a lot of sense, right? Is that it can't just be you and like the owner or you and the interior designers trying to figure out all this. We need to involve the people on the front lines because they're the ones working with these items every day. And so when you look at the process of collaborating with dining directors, executive chefs, how do you do that collaboration so that you can create not just a functional experience for the residents, but this cohesive and elevated dining experience in the community?
Definitely important. Again, I will always stress it to my team and everybody else. Ask a bunch of questions, work with the different directors and who's going to make the decision. I think that's important. But I think it's important to capture the mood. What are they trying to accomplish? And then what we will do is we provide a mood board. Based on the mood board, we get their feedback and we either we come up with more ideas or they're like, "Oh, this is great. You guys get us." And then we either bring them to our showroom or in some cases they will come out to the property, someone like me, and we will set the table and we will give a bunch of different options to look at in your facility. I think that's really important is to
Yeah.
make sure you see it in the facility because sometimes it looks really good somewhere else, but when you put it in your environment, you're like, that really doesn't work. So I always recommend seeing it in the space, making sure it looks right. And then once you pick out the ones you like, test it, take it back to the kitchen, put something on it, put it in one of your delivery carts and see how long it holds the heat, the bouillon cups or across, the property. I think it's just as important that the chef loves it and they love to plate and fun things like that, but is to test the product and see how it performs.
Yeah. And one of the things that I always think about, especially looking as the evolution of what is food service going to be in senior living, is that it's not going to just be tabletop, right? I know that you guys have all sorts of non food stuff that you guys work with. And so when you're thinking about creating that custom elevated experience that goes from the main dining room where it's a sit down experience to maybe a cafe where it's more grab and go, or a bar where there's bar food, but they also cocktails and mocktails are being done. What does that look like? How does the process different than what we just talked about of how do we streamline kind of all those different service types?
One thing that you can do, and one thing I know with the brands I represent, they have is to pick your base, and maybe it is a couple of base plates, cups, bowls, and then for each concept, adding a different like a side plate and a fun plate or a dessert option or something that makes each concept within the property unique. And that way, if you have you can never go wrong with white. And I know, like, you just
Yeah.
you can. I don't know if you as a chef like think that, but I just think that makes the food pop and it makes everything great. Well, and I think that's a really great place to start, and then to just add your little pops of color and it's also not like you said, it's not just the plates, it's like the serving vessels and having a family style serving and those little pops of color in the buffet, how you present stuff, unique glassware for the bar and for the cafe. So, and just to make those little unique changes. And then maybe in memory care, you have that same plate, but they have if you want to pop a color on there to attract the attention, you do that same plate, but with some type of pop of color, and
Yeah.
it all goes together. And so it's streamlined across the road. And that way, when you have an event and you run out of something, and I don't know if this ever happened to you, but
Yeah.
yeah, and so you had to go grab one from somewhere else, and then it kinda works operationally. But I really think just adding in those pops of if you have, like, a new menu item or a new, mocktail, come up with a really different piece. You don't have to invest a ton of money in
Mhm.
one piece versus you don't have to change out everything. Just add in a little pop of fun and different. And the properties that I've worked with that on the higher end, I mean, they've done a really good job in just like throwing in some crazy I'm like, "You don't want that?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah." And it's super crazy. And I love that you mentioned mocktails, and there's so many cool shapes and the way that a senior can grab it and hold it. There's a lot of different options in that as well. So, I like surprising guests. I think it's fun, and especially, like I said, when your menu is the same for a long time, which I know some properties have, like, having that just a different presentation can really change everything.
I love that. Like it's about what is operationally functional, yet gives you that unique feel, regardless of where you're at on property. So, as we kind of wrap up here, I do want to ask what are one or two of the more common challenges that you come across when you're looking at a dining project in senior living? You may have already mentioned them, but how do you overcome those challenges? I guess maybe is a better way to frame that.
I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times. It's just differing opinions. What's important to them, design or function, and making sure that we accomplish the goal with, meeting the needs of design and function. Other challenges are, I think, cost. If you're used to not having a nice presentation and you've just been using just really thick china and forever, that's a hard adjustment, I think, for people in the switch. But if you can sit down and show them the return on investment over time and the guests and their satisfaction, that goes a long way. I did a huge hospital I was working with, and this is a long time ago, and they use those pellet plates, and I just regular pellet plates. And then I come in and I'm like, hey, here's a new, another option, and it'll elevate the presentation, but it also should hold heat better. They're like, we can't afford that. And even the factory told me, they're like, don't even bother showing them. They're not going to pay that much money. And but we put it through the test, and they saw like, hey, this plate actually held the heat better than our other plate.
Yeah.
And a lot of these food service directors are and chefs, their bonuses and increases are based on the customer satisfaction. So I know for me, like personally, I've had a lot of health issues and I've had to be in the hospital for a long time. And when I get served that dining tray, I mean, it would have been awesome if they could have done just something fun. Because
Yeah.
if they would have, and the presentation, look for me, and I know that's not really unfair because that's what I do, but I mean, you can only imagine just throwing in like a fun pick in the food or just a little something, whether it's a theme or whatever, just to break out of old habits. I think that's the hardest thing. But once you do it and once you start seeing the return on investment, it's definitely worth investing in.
Yeah, that eating with our eyes is something that we all know is there, but we just don't ever really think about when we get into the operations and the reviewing of everything. So, Nancy, this has been a great conversation. How can the listeners learn more about what W3 Sales does, how they can reach out to you, how they connect, and maybe have you help them with their next project?
Oh, thank you so much. We would love to work with you guys. You can find us on www.w3salesonline.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, and we also have a podcast as well called Confessions Beyond the Food. So we would love to come alongside your next project.
Perfect, Nancy. Well, thanks so much for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me, Erin. It's been fun.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestle. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.